Hi, and welcome to the Adoption's Truth podcast. Our goal is to spread the awareness of the tie between adoption and mental health. Many people are affected by adoption, whether you're the adoptee, adopting parent, birth parent, or maybe even a friend or family member. We hope to continue to educate and help people understand how important mental health is when it comes to adoption. Enjoy the podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of Adoption's Truth. I'm your host, David, and I hope with this podcast you will leave with really just gaining more knowledge into adoption and the mental health side that I feel like isn't getting as much attention as it should. I learned a lot about myself over the past few years and have really engrossed myself more into adoption and not only learning about myself, but learning, I'm like, is there a way to spread more knowledge in this area? Is there a way to help people? And that's kind of really what my goal is with this podcast. So I hope that you guys will enjoy my first episode here. I'd love to get into and talk about my story, my experience, and really hopefully just kind of help people start to understand and see maybe some of the mental health side of adoption. And I'd love to be able to, hopefully with this, be able to bring other people on that have, as you will see, I'm sure we'll be able to do that, but you'll see people have so many different stories and different experiences. And there's the foster care world that I was not a part of. It's a whole nother animal that I don't know about. Started reading a couple different books on adoption, and it's very fascinating. It's very close, obviously, to my heart as I was adopted. So I really hope, if anything, you guys just take away that it's entertaining, obviously, and that maybe you learn something at the end of the day. I think, it's all about learning and growing as people and just trying to get better every day. So first and foremost, if you don't know, so I am David. I'm sure many of you that are listening probably know I'm adopted. For anybody that's new, I am adopted. I was adopted at right about 2 weeks old. So I was adopted at a very young age. I was adopted into a very loving family that played a huge role in my life and continue to. It's so hard to explain a thought process on being adopted, considering you're such a young age. In that regard of being 2 weeks old, it's such a hard thing to process. I would say the most common question I get, and this is something I definitely want to open up to because I'm sure there's so many questions people have, and the first is usually, can I ask a question? And one thing you'll learn, I'm an open book. I truly believe that talking about things and getting your feelings out, your emotions out, is one of the best things you could do in the world to heal and grow. This is something I've learned as of recently. So this isn't something I've had in my mind forever. I've learned from trial and error, to talk about things. So I would say the first question I usually get is, of course, can I ask questions? Usually they'll ask, when did you find out that you were adopted? Is a very common question. And like I said, I was adopted into an incredible family, and 2 weeks old, so I was very young. But it's kind of funny. I don't remember really the first time I was told, but I remember I was very young because I remember telling people in school that I was, and I didn't really fully comprehend what it meant. So very young age, I don't know, first grade or so, which looking back, I think is great. I think it's great to know. I think hiding it probably is one of the not so great things to do. And I'll get into some of that. There's a book I will say now, there's a book I will probably reference a ton. I'm currently reading, flying through. It's incredible. It's by Sherry Eldridge. It's called 20 Things I Wish My Adoptive Parents Knew About Me. Anybody that is adopted or is interested in getting to know, it's an incredible read, a very easy read. And it's actually pretty cool. It's actually a book that, from what I read, she's kind of implementing them, and they're attached now to adoption agencies, becoming a mandatory read for adopting parents, which I think is great. But I will reference the book a lot. There's a lot of things in there that I think, especially as I have read, really resonate with me. But that is probably one of the most common questions I receive, is when did you know? So I knew at a very young age, and my parents, were always great, saying, they loved me, and I was special, and all really good things. And it's funny, you grow up and you think about it from time to time, but it's one of those things that you don't sit there sometimes and will think about it. It'll pop up randomly. And it's one of those things I thought about more. It's almost like, how you have deja vu or you remember a dream. It's kind of like that, as you get older, or you start thinking about like, oh my gosh, like I do remember thinking about that, like things like that. So I remember, for instance, I was in Walmart one time, and for preference of the background story, the knowledge I had, I don't want to use people's names here just out of respect, but I had knowledge of who my birth mother was. I had photos. She had me at a very young age, right about 18 years old, and didn't know too much about my birth father at the time. I had a couple of letters from her when I was born, she had written, and then I got to read them around when I was 12. So a little bit of limited knowledge in the area, obviously. So I was born in the very early 90s, so things have changed, but the amount of information I was given was not a ton. Obviously, I wouldn't expect my parents, my adoptive parents, to really know too much. It wasn't an open adoption, it was a closed adoption. Another thing that wasn't very popular back then that has started to gain steam now. But so I didn't know a ton of information, but curiosity takes over. You start to just kind of start wondering, like, I wonder where they live, or I wonder, excuse me, I wonder where they live, or I wonder what they look like, or, at least with photos, it's nice. You can kind of see like, oh, cool, I got my eyes from this person or that. But sometimes curiosity can drive you crazy, but at a young age, you don't sit there and think about it as much. Again, you kind of just have these moments of it'll pop in your head. And for this story, I was in Walmart, and I'll never forget. So my birth mother had some very distinguishable features of, being short and hair color and stuff like that. So I remember I was with my dad. We were in the grocery store, and I just like stopped, and I saw this woman that looked so similar to my birth mother, and it was just like, oh my gosh. I was like, I wonder if that's, and then it just, that whole day I couldn't stop thinking about it. I'm like, well, I wonder if it was. Now knowing where she lives and everything, probably wasn't. But it just ate me up that day. It ate me up. It was just, oh my gosh, is that the person? Is that the person? And then it manifests, and then over a few days it goes away. But there's a lot of thinking at a young age, and you don't. It's a lot of things you don't understand. It's a lot of feelings you don't understand. In this book, it really tackles kind of searching an identity, and this is something I've talked with a couple other people that have been adopted, whether they've been in similar situations as me, as adopted young or been in foster care. But a common theme I see is a struggle of searching for an identity, which is something pretty much everyone faces. I mean, wholeheartedly, everybody faces searching for identity. And then when you're adopted on top of that, it's like a second. You're not only searching for the identity of who you are, you're also searching for some familiarity, somebody that I look like, or somebody that, this or that. So it's this second level of searching for an identity. And I think it holds a lot of truth in people that are adopted, that it's a big struggle. It's something that I know I struggled with for a long time, searching for somebody that I look like, and it gives you some just security and comfort in if you ever do find those people, which is something I will get into. I did end up finding them down the road, but I was very fortunate. I was put in a great home. very loving parents that I was not very open in the regard of the adoption. I wasn't constantly asking questions. But it was something that my parents did talk about at a young age, which was great. But it's something that I think as you get older, you start seeing areas of, I wish I would have talked about this more. I wish I would have done this. And it's a little hindsight's 50-50, but, or 20-20. I literally just said 50-50. So that in its own is a thing. But later on, as I got older, I started to get curious. I knew when the time came, I wanted to go out and search and find. And at that time, you had to reach out to your adoption agency, to the case holder of that adoption. Luckily, my birth mother actually found me on Facebook, which was just kind of getting kickstarted then. I was a lost puppy on it, but lo and behold, it was her. And my adoptive mother, I'll never forget it. It was the eve of Valentine's Day. I was going into Valentine's Day. It was February 13th. And I had my mother, my adoptive mother, go on Facebook and say, I said, hey, who's this woman? She said she knows you, blah, 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 blah. And my mom had worked everywhere. I mean, she knew a lot of people. She worked in the school system. She worked in hospitality. She's known a lot of people. A lot of people know her. I assumed it's just a random woman that worked at the school and wanted to get in contact with my mom, blah, blah, blah. Lo and behold, it was my birth mother. And my mom was like, oh, that's your birth mother. And it was like such a... You have like a million questions, just so many thoughts run through your head of like, and for me, with the limited things I knew, I didn't even know who my birth father was. So that in its own was like, okay, well, who's the birth father? Because long story short, but I was given these letters, and one of them was very detailed about this guy. I don't know, use his name. It might be his real name. I don't know who he is. But this guy, and saying that was my birth father, and this love story. And it always seemed fishy to me. I was like, this just doesn't, I don't know. This doesn't seem like this is the guy. So that's kind of like my first thing, like, who's my birth father? Like, I want to know who that is. And then, do I have any siblings? Health things. That's huge. Like, that's one of the big things, too, is I think in the identity search, too, you're looking like, okay, you're raised and you will, over time, pick up things that your parents do, like I think I was taught a lot about being a kind Christian and all these things from my parents, but you're also looking for, okay, well, their health issues I literally biologically will not have, mine will be different. So as you're a kid, I was like, I had asthma, but my parents didn't have asthma. So that kind of hit my head too as a kid. I'm like, what other things could there be? So that was a huge question I had. I'm like, what other health concerns do I have? And you could just write down a million questions, obviously, in that situation you probably want to ask. So fortunate enough, she was willing to meet me. I found out who my birth dad was. I got his Facebook page and wanted to connect with him. And then we ended up setting up a meeting, actually very cool. I was able to meet my birth mother at the hospital that I was born at, which I thought was a really cool little full circle thing. But so me and my mother, my adoptive mother, went to go meet my birth mother. And it was a really cool experience. I think, and I've talked to other adoptees about this, it's this weird feeling that you can't really describe when you meet them. It's emotional. It's, and that's the thing too. It's emotional for everyone. And it's emotional. It's not only about the adoptee. I mean, this is the adopting parents, the birth family. I mean, all around, it's a very emotional experience because at the end of the day, like, you're searching for an identity. You're trying not to step on people's toes. That's a huge concern I had in this process, which I'm sure is a question people are thinking right now. I was so concerned. I was like, I don't want to hurt people's feelings. I was brought up very be kind and, help others. And so, like, I never wanted to hurt people's feelings. So that was a big thing in my head, but the experience in itself was great. I got to ask a ton of questions. It started a relationship. Unfortunately, that relationship did not hang on for very, very long, but it was great to be able to have the experience, to be able to ask questions, to be able to find out really at the end of the day more about yourself. I mean, you really you start putting together pieces of, oh my gosh, okay, this is why I've had this health issue, or oh my gosh, this is, like my eye twitches too, and like, like just weird things that sound so odd, but like are very, it is, you came from that person. So it connects a lot of dots for you, and it really brought a lot of closure to myself to finding out who I was. And I was 17 years old, which I don't even know if I said that, so I was pretty young. But I did find out I also had a half-brother and half-sister, which I was also able to meet, and that is an awesome experience in itself, to find out that you have half-siblings, and go down that road. And then I don't want to get too much into them. I mean, that's a whole experience in itself, and maybe that's another type of podcast I'll have in this, but I do want to get into, it took close to, I want to say almost a year. So it was about December 13th. I believe it was December 13th. Was it like a day or two after my birthday, I think? So it was about 10 months later. I had gone down to the city where my birth father lived to meet him, and that was a super surreal experience. It was a little bit more surreal than being my birth mother, to be honest. And maybe it's because I'm a male, so I for some reason, I look very identical to my birth father. So I was able to go down. Him and I started talking via Facebook, which I'm sure is a super great conversation of, hi, I know who you are. So I'm sure it's funny enough. I'd love to find this conversation. I think him and I still talk. We're still close, and I think he has the conversation still on Facebook. And I was super weird. I was a weird kid. I think I did say something along the lines of like, I know who you are. So I was weird. It was way too straightforward. But anyways, it was a great experience. It was awesome to be able to go down there, and we went to a small breakfast cafe, and we just talked. I mean, I felt so bad for the waitress that we just kept talking and never ordered. We finally did, probably after like 2 hours. I feel so bad for her. Obviously, she didn't know what was going on. But it's, like I said, it's so hard to explain the feelings, the emotions, the thought process. You just want to ask a million questions. Like, what were you like a teenager? What music did you like? Everything. Like, you want to know everything about these people. And it's hard too. Like, so for me, as a background thing, I was big on, I remember I kind of talked to my mom and I talked to my dad before anything happened. And I remember I was very, hey, you guys are my parents at the end of the day. Cause that's a big thing. A lot of adoptees I talk to, the first thing I do is I'm like, oh, that's awesome. I'm adopted too. And then I start asking a couple questions. Oh, do you mind if I ask you blah, blah, blah. And usually my first one is, do you have interest in pursuing to find your birth family? And at first, this is years ago, I found a lot of them said no. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Usually curiosity kills. Like, it just eats you alive and you want to know. And they said usually they don't want to kind of tarnish what they already have. And I think that's great out of, like, respect. But also, like, I think you learn a lot about yourself by doing it. And I was very big on, I talked to my mom, I talked to my dad, and I was very straightforward. And, hey, you guys are my parents. That's never going to change. Like, the people that raise you, I mean, I'm sure there's people listening that, maybe their uncle raised them, or maybe their cousin, one of their older cousins raised them. Or it's like that person's like your mom or your dad. You know what I mean? Like, that person's always going to be the person that was there for you as a child. So that doesn't change. So that was a big thing I was very big on, and I would definitely advocate, because, again, talking about things is huge, and I think that's how you get your ideas across, and you don't hold grudges. And so I think that's super important, and that was something that I did, and it was hard. I mean, I can't even imagine, like, the thoughts of my parents, and, like, they're scared to lose. I know recently I talked to my dad lately. We've started to talk about this because I've started to get interested in knowing more. And he said, he was really worried. Like, his first thought was like, oh my gosh, am I going to lose him? Like, am I going to lose David, me? And he's like, but I remember, no, I raised you and you're respectful and I'm your dad. I was there changing your diapers. And so it's a mental, to really tie this back in, this is a very mental, emotional process that takes a toll on everyone involved. But at the end of the day, the mental things that I think adoptees go through, especially as a kid, as a young age, everything they have to go through already, not even being adopted, especially in today's world. Oh my gosh, with social media and everything, that alone, I think everybody in the world needs to talk to a therapist. No joke. I really do. I think everybody needs to. There's so much mental health awareness that needs to be brought to so many things. And then on top of that, to be adopted, to have identity, constantly searching for identity, or fear of, you don't want to hurt people because the people you raise, because you're scared they might leave. That's a super common thing that's in this book, and it talks so much about it. And it starts to resonate with me. Like, you're so scared to hurt people's feelings. You're so scared. You don't want to lose people. I still to this day sometimes battle with that. I am so scared of arguments, and this is something I had a great conversation with somebody I hope to have on the podcast soon. But she as well was adopted, and her story is I love that. She has a great story. It's something that her and I had a connection on. That was the fear of losing people. This internal fear of people are going to leave you, and sometimes you're like, I have to be impressive. I have to get these people to like me because they might leave. And it's sad, but it's in the back of your brain. And the best way to describe it to people, I feel like, is the reason that develops is, as a kid, when you find out you're adopted, you can tell a child, you're the chosen, you're loved, you're this, you're that. But just literally, like, for a kid to think, okay, this person had me, whether they couldn't have me anymore due to age, money, whatever, they didn't want to have me, gave me to somebody else. Who's to say that those people are not going to get rid of me too? It's you're battling that, And luckily, I'm very blessed that my family was super loving, super caring, like, it gave me so much. But it still is an eternal battle of, you're so scared to still lose. You know what I mean? And it's something I've fought recently, and I've fought with, arguments in relationships. And I never wanted to have an argument because I was like, oh, no. If I have an argument, this person can leave. Excuse me. And that's a very scary thing that I think a lot of adoptees go through, the fear of loss. And you lost, at the end of the day, you lost a birth mother, possibly a birth father. Now, you gained a lot, and there's nothing to take away from that, but it's still mentally dealing with the loss, and dealing with how to cope, how to understand that then the new people aren't going to leave you, or, well, it's also part of life, like, you might be in a relationship, you might be out of the relationship. It's a big transition. I think it's, for adoptees, sometimes it's even a little bit more challenging to really understand at a young age. So that's my best way of describing it. I have a lot of crazy stories of when I was young. I remember yelling things to friends about not being wanted, and not about my adoptive family, but as being adopted. Like, oh, I was adopted because I wasn't wanted. I didn't know the true reason as to why I was put up for adoption until later on. I found out, I was like, well, they were young, and she couldn't. She was too young to keep me, and financially and all that. Totally normal. But it's just psychologically, as a kid, I didn't even understand why I was yelling those things, I think internally I was battling like this fear, of like, well, I don't want my adoptive parents to ever, you know what I mean? It's just, it's hard to understand. I think if you're an adoptee, it's a little easier to relate to. And again, this book, I swear I'm not paid by her, but this book is incredible. It really gives you an insight into some of the feelings, some of the emotions, and understanding where a lot of adoptees come from emotionally. So I'm sorry it was a little bit of a ramble, but that's a lot of. I'm trying to think of the questions that people would have, and try to answer them best I can. But so that's a little bit of my story as to how I met my birth mother, how I met my birth father. I did meet my birth half sister and half brother. they're awesome. That was a cool experience. And yeah, I mean, for the most part, that's my adoption story, and where I am today is just continuing to learn and grow. I think self-help, self-love is one of the most important things that we can do. I learned so much about to meditate or pray, or, if you're religious, if you're not, meditate. It really helps a lot because, and especially, I mean, I wish I would have more as I was a kid, because it's like you're almost stressed and you don't know you're stressed. You're confused, you're lost. I had somebody come up to me and talk to me about that they actually they have an adopted son who's, he's a teen, and he said, "Hey, I'd love if you talk to him. This is what he's going through," and he said he feels a little lost, and sometimes he doesn't feel like he's he's one of us, and he just feels out of the group sometimes, but we're very inclusive, and I totally get it. I mean, it's a whirlwind of emotions, Like I said, at the end of the day, you're searching for your identity, and I think that in its own is huge. And I think there's got to be a solution out there to help the tons of adopted and foster care into adoption kids that battle with that. And I think we're getting there. And I think this is a huge step to be able to continue to push and just really show people it is hard, it's great. And there's nothing to take away from that. It's phenomenal when loving families want to add to their family and bring in more kids to the family. I think it's an incredible act. It's hard, it's courageous, it's great. But there's a whole mental health side to this too. It's a lot, not only on the adoptee, it's a lot on the family, but especially the adoptee. And I think we're slowly getting there. But I hope you guys really enjoyed hearing not only a little bit of my adoption story, but also me ramble. I'm just trying to think if there's anything I left out. I mean, that's really where my story is. I was, like I said, 2 weeks old, young birth parents, and I'm 27 now. I'm continuing to search and figure out more about myself. And that's the one big thing is I think you're searching for identity for a long time, but once you could really continue to just learn more about yourself, learn what you're passionate about, and really learn where you get a lot of your emotions from, and why things affect you the way that you do. That was the one big thing that kickstarted me into this is, that's weird. Why do I hate confrontation? Why do I not like to argue at all? Why do I not like any argument or not any argument, but why do I not like to have any discussion that could be hard? Like, that's not normal. Like hard discussions is life. I mean, this right here is uncomfortable for me a little bit. Like, it's hard, but I think having hard discussions and opening up is one of the biggest things people can do, and that's only going to make you better. I mean, I will say, Joe Rogan says that. The things that make you the most uncomfortable, I'm sure more than Joe Rogan has said it, but the things that make you uncomfortable are the things that make you better. Like you have a workout that gets uncomfortable, you're getting stronger. You have a hard conversation that makes you uncomfortable, it makes the relationship stronger. And I think that is exactly what we need to do. And I hope that we continue to have discussions and continue to grow as people every day. So I hope you guys truly enjoyed my podcast on my adoption story and a little bit of me rambling and trying to tie it into mental health. And that's really where I want to go with this is I want to continue to talk to people that have their story. I want to talk to people that how mental health has affected them in their adoption and the process of it. So my hope is to do this every week and to have people on and to talk about this and continue to give you guys great entertainment and just great quality of information. So again, thank you so much for tuning in to the very first episode of Adoption is Truth. If you guys would like, you're more than welcome to go over to, I have a website up, which is theadoptionstruth.wordpress.com. Again, that is theadoptionstruth.wordpress.com. I will put up, obviously the podcast will be up there, the link to the YouTube channel. I will also have articles or blogs rather that I will put up there and I will write. So yeah, I would appreciate if you guys would support this. I'm super passionate about it. I think it's a great area that whether you're adopted, you're not adopted, almost everyone knows somebody at the end of the day. And I think it's a great area if you're interested to learn to please subscribe. And if you guys enjoyed this podcast, I would love it so much if you guys would just write a review, give me, whatever star you think it deserves. But if you would write a review, it would mean the world to me. And it really would help get this podcast out there. So if you did enjoy it, that is a great way to help push this podcast, or share it with a friend, maybe somebody you know that's adopted, that just wants to learn, and maybe they can come on the show too. So again, thank you guys so much for listening, and I hope you guys have an awesome Memorial Day weekend. We'll talk to you soon. Guys, there is no way that I could have a podcast that has to do in any way, shape, or form with mental health without shouting out that it is Mental Health Awareness Month. So please, if you are battling anything internally, anything that you get off your chest, whether you're feeling down or depressed or anxiety, anything that you're going through mentally, it's a great month just to bring awareness to the issue and really go out and address it. And it's not a month thing. This isn't something people battle for 1 month. This is a year-round thing. And to be able to get clarity is a beautiful thing, and have peace of mind. So please call any of the numbers out there. Reach out to somebody you know, whether it's family, a friend, whoever you're comfortable with. Just please reach out to somebody, talk to them. But again, hope you guys enjoy the podcast, and look forward to you guys tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys soon.